Hey everybody, Happy New Year, and welcome back to Tired Old Queen at the Movies. If you want to hear from Steve every day, make sure to follow us on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Now let's go see the Tired Old Queen at the Movies, Steve Hayes.
Oh, Johnny, we hadn't done a Bogart movie in a while, or a film noir, so I chose 1944's Conflict, starring Humphrey Bogart, Alexis Smith, Sydney Greenstreet, Charles Drake, and Rose Hobart. Now, this is a movie directed by Curtis Bernhardt, who was a German director. He came over from Ufa. He escaped the Nazis. He was a big, famous director in Germany. He had a cachet so that when he got here, he was offered contracts with every studio. But he chose Warner Brothers because he liked the hard-boiled feel of those Warner Brothers melodramas. And actually, he became famous as a good woman's director at Warner's. He directed Bette Davis in Stolen Life. He directed Joan Crawford in Possessed. And he directed Barbara Stanwyck in My Reputation, all of which we did here on Tired Old Queen at the Movies. This was a movie that was assigned to Bogart right after he did Casablanca, and he didn't want to do it.
I wish you hadn't said that.
This movie, he was going to be an out-and-out murderer, and he fought it and fought it and fought it. And finally, Jack Warner said, listen, kid, you're either going to do this movie or you're going on suspension. Bogart never liked to go on suspension, so he ended up doing the movie. This is a great noir. I love this movie. He hated this movie, and I think it's one of his best performances. He plays this architect named Richard Mason, and he's married to this harpy played by Rose Hobart, who's sort of in the Gail Sondergaard mode. I love Rose Hobart. She's one of my favorite second lead, bitchy females.
I suppose you'd like me to step out of the picture. Well, I'll never do that.
He's also fallen in love with her sister, who's played by Alexis Smith. So the movie opens and they're having an argument. They're going to go and celebrate their 5th anniversary together. And she's telling him to pick up his socks. And he goes, I don't know why you're always hopping on me. She goes, why do you think I'm hopping on you? And he says, I don't know why. She goes, because of your ridiculous infatuation with my sister. I suppose you want me to divorce you, don't you? Well, I'll never do that. Never. Right then, things are trouble. So they go to this party that Sydney Greenstreet, their best friend, has given for their anniversary.
But the thing that he admires about me is that in the pursuit of pure science, I've learned to put my heart in a cage.
Alexis Smith is there and looking beguiling and young and gorgeous and luscious.
That's very strong-minded of you, but I'm not quite convinced.
And they have a really good time, and on the way home, they have a car accident.
Look out!
And Bogart breaks his leg, kind of badly, and he's laid up for a while. And during the time that he's been thinking, he's more in love with Alexis Smith, he's married to this harpy, what's going to happen here? And finally his doctor says to him, I don't know why you don't go to the mountains. You'll feel better, you can swim and stuff. And he goes, that's a great idea. Kathy, why don't we go to the mountains? And you look really kind of lovely today. And she goes, it's amazing how nice someone can be once in a while when they want something from you.
It's funny how virtuous a man can be when he's helpless.
He fakes a call and says, I got a call from work. I'm going to have to join you tomorrow. And she said, well, I can't go up there alone. He goes, sure you can. You've been there hundreds of times. Just take the mountain road and go on up. So, unbeknownst to everybody else in the movie, his leg has been healed for weeks. And he gets in a car and he drives up the mountain. And it's one of my favorite scenes. She's driving through this fog-filled mountain road, and she gets up there and she turns a corner and there's a car blocking the road. And she honks her horn and nobody's there. And all of a sudden she notices someone just standing in the shadows. And she goes to back up the car and Bogart steps forward and goes, Kathy! And she goes, oh, Richard, you scared me. I thought, Richard, you're walking. Why are you here? Richard. No. And Bogart is so sinister, and he just comes towards the camera and comes towards his camera. And he breaks her neck. Now, he has her in the car, sets the car into gear, and sends the car over a cliff. And there must be in a logging camp area, because it hits all these logs, and this car goes flying over the cliff and down the cliff, and the logs come down on top of it and everything, and it's so exciting. Formed like a teepee sort of thing that obscures everything. I love car wrecks in movies. All right, shoot me. I can't help it. Train wrecks, car wrecks, I love to watch them in movies. And then he goes back into LA and he calls up Sydney Greenstreet and the police. He goes, my wife has been missing. She was supposed to be there. I can't reach her on the phone. So this starts this whole search for his wife. Okay. And he maintains, I called her. I was here. I was conducting business. Everything, a great alibi. He starts smelling her perfume.
Can't you smell it?
He comes home one night and her jewelry is there. He sees a woman walking on the street in her hat who looks just like her. He goes down to find out to a pawn shop where he got this ring, and he finds her name is written in the ledger. He starts to freak out. And he goes to Sydney Greenstreet and he goes, oh, listen, I'm sure she's dead. I'm sure she's dead. And Sydney Greenstreet is so fabulous, and he goes, well, he's a psychiatrist. He goes, well, there's no reason to think that she's not dead, but you're getting overly anxious. You're getting way too anxious. I think you're going to have too much stress. You're going to even have a breakdown.
Ever run across anything like this before? Only once. Many years ago when I was a student in Vienna. What was that? Man who murdered his wife.
And you're waiting for him because the only way that he's going to be able to prove that, and you think she might be alive too, you think she's alive, is if he goes back to the crime. And that's where I'm going to stop it right there. The woman who plays the wife, Rose Hobart, she and Bogart had done Broadway together and were really good friends. As much as they were harping on each other in this movie, they're really, really good friends. And she was blacklisted in the 40s, and that was the end of her career. She claimed in her autobiography that Lee J. Cobb named names and he blacklisted her and stuff, and that was the end of her career. Alexis Smith was being groomed as the great, gorgeous, luscious ingenue of Warner Brothers, and she never really got to show what she could do until the 1970s when Stephen Sondheim took Follies to her, and she won the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical, and she sang like some of the great classic Sondheim songs, and she had a really good career. She did a musical called Platinum, which I saw on Broadway, and she was great in that. This was typical Warner Brothers. It's so atmospheric. You're going to love this. The fog and the film noir. And Bogart has never been, except for maybe Casablanca, more trench coat Bogart. He's got the trench coat and the fedora, and he's really doing the Bogart thing, Bogart was such a wonderful actor. His instincts were so amazing, and ironically, this was one of two movies that he made where he killed his wife to marry Alexis Smith. He did this one, and then the following year, he did a movie called The Two Mrs. Carrolls with Barbara Stanwyck and Alexis Smith, in which he tries to kill her so he can marry Alexis Smith. She had that effect on people. During the time this movie was made, Bogart could probably kind of relate to this because he was married to Mayo Metho at that time, and he called her Sluggy. And they were both hard drinkers, and they had huge public fights where she would pick up bottles and throw them across restaurants and hit him in the head, and the blood would gush out, and she would fist pump him, and he'd slug her. And their fights were notorious, and nobody wanted him to come to the restaurants. My growing up used to shudder, because they were just knock down, drag out fights. Then he met Betty Bacall, and that was the end of that. I think you are going to be enchanted by the film noir atmosphere, acting, Warner Brothers production values, and just good old-fashioned murder. Humphrey Bogart, Sydney Greenstreet, Alexis Smith, and Rose Hobart in Curtis Bernhardt's Conflict.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Could you do a stupid outtake? I'll try. I don't know if I can, but I'll try.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat.